Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We continue our reading of the life and teachings of Shri Madhwacharya, written by Shri C.M. Padmanabhacharya. We are currently reading the other dialectical triumphs. That's the chapter name. The page number is 101. From this time forward, polemical contests with eminent scholars of the day began to occur at frequent intervals. While ordinary people flocked to his mutt like bees to a honeycomb to drink deep of his honeyed utterances, pundits with high pretensions to learning became restlessly jealous to hear of his fame. They could not bear to hear of a new star of greater magnitude and luster than themselves, appearing in the galaxy of letters. They therefore journeyed to Udupi in numbers to obtain a first-hand acquaintance with the new celebrity. After Poornaprajna was made as the pontiff of the Mata and he was named as Anandatheertha, the people of the day, like the normal people or the general people, used to come to the Mata in order to listen to his honeyed words. All his words were very soothing to the ear and to the mind. And they were very much influenced by it and they used to like it. On the other hand, the learned people who were um, actually not, they had high pretensions of learning, is what Acharya says. They became very restless and they were very jealous. So they wanted to actually come here and take a look at that person who is getting so much fame. They wanted to really see what is it and whether they could actually pull him down also is one of their ideas. Achyuta Preksha held an important position among the brotherhood of sadhus. He kept an open door of hospitality to visitors in general and to scholarly guests in particular. It chanced that a sannyasi friend of his was his guest at Udupi with a large number of camp followers, including some respectable pundits. These learned men used to engage Sri Madhva in friendly parleys on miscellaneous topics. They were skillful logicians and prided themselves a bit on their special knowledge. On one of these occasions, the discussion became warm and animated. Achyuta Preksha was quite a renowned um, person among the brotherhood of sadhus, and he used to always welcome visitors to his mata. So it once happened that a sannyasi friend of his had come to visit Udupi along with a large number of followers, and he was engaged in friendly arguments with Acharya Madhva. They were all skillful logicians. So, and they prided themselves on it. Like they felt that their logic was unbeatable. On one such discussion became very warm and animated. The point was whether inference was entitled to value as an independent source of knowledge. Perception, inference, and testimony are usually regarded as the main sources of human knowledge. We act on a belief in the veracity of our senses. We act likewise on the testimony of reliable persons. In the same manner, we use the reasoning faculty and draw inferences from proper grounds. Sri Madhva maintained that this source of human knowledge was far inferior in value to perception and testimony. This position was stoutly opposed by his brethren. So here Acharya very clearly lays out the actual question of the debate. The means to knowledge is well accepted as 1. Perception, 2. Inference, and 3. Testimony. Here the testimony means testimony of a reliable source. It might be a person, an eyewitness, or it might be the agamas or the Vedas, which are to be accepted as true thoughts. So here Acharya Madhva says that the perception and testimony take precedence over inference, and inference by itself has much less value compared to these. So when he proposed this, then the Swami who had along with his followers were there, who were very good logicians. They wanted to oppose that theory. Now the Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga systems of philosophy uphold Anumana or inference as an authority of paramount value. They do not concede the superiority of Pratyaksha or Shabda in any sense. As systems resting the weight of their tenets on reason, they are commonly referred to as Haitukas. So we see that the four branches of philosophy, namely Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Yoga, they keep their main source of knowledge as Anumana, in the sense that they keep attach a very high value to it. They do not consider the superiority of Pratyaksha, means the direct perception, and Shabda, which is the testimony. So they are also referred to as Haitukas because of this. Now, Acharya Madhva wanted to oppose that. So, what did he do? Sri Madhva argued that if inference did not rest on perception or testimony as its basis in the last resort, most extravagant deductions and inductions may be drawn from any given data. His opponents, being masters and admirers of Haitu schools, challenged the soundness of this proposition. So, what was Madhwa's argument? It is clearly stated here that inference which can be made based on the what is the experience and the testimony. Both based on these two things, if the inference is made, then it will be valid. Otherwise, if you just make an inference without any basis of perception or even testimony, then how can it not be extravagant? You can't just make a proposition and say that this will be true without having the valid basis of perception or agama for it. By way of illustration, they tried by means of syllogism to establish that spirit and matter were separate entities. Sri Madhva met them by counter syllogisms of equal cogency. Then the controversial then the controversialists exchanged positions. Sri Madhva again proved irresistible. He said that if we choose not to recognize the authority of sense experience, if we set aside the testimony of speech writings and revelations, pure unaided reasoning can establish no truth whatsoever, for every argument implies postulates of some kind based on the sense experience of the arguer or the word of some reliable personage, be he God or man in the ultimate. So they tried many methods to they wanted to establish that the spirit and matter were different entities, and they started giving logic for that. Madhva came and told them, Madhva told them that counter arguments he gave, which was also very logical, and explained that how we cannot choose such a theory which is not based on the authority of sense experience or the testimony of the speech and writings um, of the truth. Every argument will have some kind of postulate, right? Even if there's logic happening, a logic also has to be told based on something. So if that based on something, whatever we are saying, that is because of the sense experience or the presence of the arguer or the testimony of some reliable person. It was felt that Sri Madhva's demonstration was convincing, though position was at the outset deemed somewhat startling. The skill and facility with which he handled the technicalities of Anumana was the subject of universal applause. He had shown himself perfectly at ease amidst a bewildering babble of propositions, middle terms, and deductions. His opponents had prided themselves on their scholarship in this branch of study as a specialty. The assembly was completely disabused of this illusion. At the end of the proceedings, they felicitated him on his powers of reasoning and voted that he was verily a prodigious Anandatheertha. So, what did he show? Madhva, because they were willing and they were friendly, they wanted to learn, they were able to understand what he said. That any logical theory which they were proposing also actually stemmed from perception or from the testimony only, and it was not without that. And so, even if they had to do it without that, they would not be able to do. Pure unaided reasoning cannot establish the truth, is what he proclaimed, and he said if it was the truth that we want to get at, then we have to have these two as a basis before we start doing any logic. So this one, it is quite a the way to understand this is to say if whether God exists or not is a question. Then by logic, if you say God is existing, then if you ask why, one can say that God exists because the world is there. So why is the world there? For that we have to say the world is there because God, a person who is of much greater significance than us, has created it. So how do you know that it is of much greater significance? Because you have experienced it. That the final thing comes that you should have experienced it, and the Puranas or the Vedas also teach that there is a supreme power who created the universe. So these kind of things were taught by Madhva in a very very enlightening manner, and without getting disturbed of mind or emotional. He was very very clear in what he wanted to say. So he was voted to be named as Anandatheertha. So far, the polemics were chiefly confined to questions of purely academical interest. Lots of Vaisheshikas came one after another, entered the list, displayed their skill by balancing themselves on some tightrope of hair splitting logical gymnastics, and were speedily silenced by more wonderful feats performed by Anandatheertha. We now enter on a new phase of these controversies. Hereafter, the discussions were attended with far reaching results. They were part of systematic campaign against dissenters. First, initially, he only proved that logic is not sufficient to prove the truth, and later on, it went into deeper. He used the same technique to show that whatever has been preached already about the Brahma Sutras or any other Shastra, which was wrong, which was not telling the truth. And he started using this technique of how to understand whether logic is really playing the right path by looking at the validity of the perception and the testimony. Then it started having far reaching results. I have already noticed in a previous chapter that South Canara was a great stronghold of Jainism, at least, if not of Buddhism too. Tuluva country is said to is said to resemble Nepal to a large extent in respect to the design and pattern of the Bitus, bastis and stambas abounding in both countries. There were Buddhist pundits of considerable reputation who could expound and defend the doctrines and practices of Buddhism and hold their own against Brahminical attacks. In this district and many other parts of India, Buddhism survived as a living faith, as it does even now, notwithstanding the supposed overthrow of the system by the Brahminical ascendancy led by Sri Shankara and Sri Ramanuja. Sri Madhva rubbed shoulders with many an adversary of this persuasion. During the period under review, one such Buddhist of reputed leadership, Buddha Sagara by name, came to Achyuta Preksha's mutt, accompanied by Vadi Simha, renowned as a Tartika scholar. Sri Madhva was then in a different mutt of his own away from Udupi. So we see that the Buddhists were very much present in the Kannada, South Kannada region at that time, and they were having a good sway over many people. And in spite of the efforts of Sri Shankara and Ramanuja to overthrow that system and bring in the Brahminical practices back to the mainstream. So during this period, when once to Achyuta Preksha's mutt came Buddhi Sagara and Vadi Simha, both of them were one of them was a Buddhist of reputed leadership. The other one was a Tarkika scholar, means a logician. These people came avowedly to engage him in a philosophical contest and defeat him if possible. Achyuta Preksha sent for Srimadanandatirtha, who promptly answered the summons. Then ensued a most animated contest. A large concourse of people thronged to listen, and eminent umpires took part in the debate to decide the issue. Vadi Simha was the first to lead the attack. In a long peroration, he summed up as many as 18 alternative positions of attack to destroy Madhwa's possible positions. Achyuta Preksha immediately sent for Anandatheertha, who was then residing at a different mutt. And then he immediately came there, and many people thronged there to listen to the debate. And there were many umpires, means to decide the issue. They had good pundits. Vadi Simha started the attack. He started giving 18 positions to attack Acharya Madhwa's theory. But Sri Madhva was quite equal to the occasion. His dignified mien and dauntless bearing produced a thrill of awe and silence. Mahadi Sumha could proceed no longer as he was unable to meet the point raised in reply. Buddhisagara next took up the gauntlet, but fared no better than his predecessor. Being greatly discomfited at the result, these two pundits pleaded for an adjournment of the debate. Sri Madhva forced them to acknowledge that they were worsted for the time. They did so, and the meeting dispersed for the day, to meet again on the morrow. Next day, people assembled again to enjoy the continuation of the intellectual wrestle. But lo and behold, Vadisima and Buddhisagara had both decamped overnight. Thus ended a highly sensational episode early in the career of our great Acharya. The sensation thus created among the thoughtful men gave a further shake to the foundations of the old beliefs. Men came to think that they were no longer to accept doctrines and usages entirely on trust because they bore the sanction of age on their brow. Men felt the vibration of a new life in the atmosphere breathed by Sri Madhva. It is seen that Vadisimha as well Buddhisagara, both of them could not meet the arguments or the counter arguments that Sri Acharya raised against whatever they said. And finally, they had to accept defeat for the day at least because they said that they would like to come back again for the next day. But actually, in the night, they ran away from there. So, this incident itself came to be a very big, major, sensational episode, and it was in the early part of the career of Acharya. Many people started thinking that what has been brought down through the generations need not be correct. What is right now being practiced or understood may be different, may be wrong, and so they have to actually think better. This was the new vibration that was felt among the people. They felt that his presence filled it with a new ozone which inspired spiritual health and strength. Doubts, partial unbeliefs, vague longings, followed by a general unrest and a spirit of enquiry, were brewing commotion and served as sure premonitions of an impending charge. Sri Madhva was felt to be the source of the new spirit, the foundation of new currents of thought whose energy was destined to vivify society and kindle a new light in Brahmin homes, brighter than electric tongues of flame, to guide men's erring steps in the forward path of salvation. Doubts and partial beliefs, disbeliefs, vague longings were all followed. Along with it, they had one general unrest and a spirit of the inquiry. That is, they wanted to know, they wanted to know. That was the impending thought processes in the people, and it signified change when the entire population itself wants to have a change of thought, then it can happen. So that is the start of the change. So the current society at that time was very much ready for it. They wanted the new light which would lead them to the path of salvation. Thus the foundation was laid and the materials got ready for the great edifice of Sri Madhwa's message. Understanding the signs of the times, he began to direct his powers and energies towards the chief point of attack in the old fortress of Shankara's system. He followed up his criticism of Ishtasiddhi by vigorous attacks on Shankara's Sutra Bhashya. This was a stronghold not likely to surrender at discretion. Achyuta Preksha clung with great tenacity to its teachings. From time to time, Anandatheertha took up a discussion of this work and exposed its faults and fallacies. Achyuta Preksha was reluctant to yield, even when his reason was convinced. A partiality born of habit, a fondness born of the midnight oil consumed for a whole lifetime in mastering its contents, made him impatient of criticism. It was his pet fetish, and he would not give up without a struggle. He allowed the force of Sri Madhwa's destructive criticism. It was all very well to criticize and pick holes, he said, but Sri Madhva had not replaced it by a commentary of his own. So Achyuta Preksha challenged him to write one if he could. An elderly ascetic of the Likucha descent who happened to stay there added his exhortation on the same lines. This challenge was of course accepted. Old Madhyageha paid occasional visits when Sri Madhva was winning laurels in this manner. On one of these occasions, Sri Madhva was arguing in his matchless style and fluency with a number of Tarkika opponents about the demerits of Shankara Bhashya. Madhyageha's eyes were filled with joy, tears of joy, and his heart almost melted with emotion at the glory of the young ascetic who had once played and lisped on his knees, whom he had hugged and fondled in his bosom, but who now had grown so great, the delight not of his eyes and heart alone, but of all eyes and all hearts. So, Sri Madhva was now tackling the actual reason why he appeared. He wanted to establish the truth that was propounded by the Brahma Sutras and the Vedas. So he was already criticizing the Ishta Siddhi and giving the right interpretations of whatever it wanted to say. I mean, in the sense that Ishta Siddhi was composed with a view to propagate the Shankara philosophy. So he wanted to establish that it did not lead to the truth. And the same way, Shankara's Bhashya was not having the essence of Veda Vyasa's thoughts in its words. So he wanted to make that change and show that the Brahma Sutras actually meant something totally different than what the Bhashya seemed to speak. But Achyuta Preksha, who was very much attached to that Sutra Bhashya, having spent many a night sitting there and reading it, sitting there and understanding it, he did not want to give it up without a struggle. So he used to allow Madhva to have the right to criticize. Then when Madhva used to criticize, then one day he asked him, why do you not compose one Sutra Bhashya yourself if you are so clever? Why do you want to go and pick the holes into this Sutra Bhashya? Then one Swami also who was residing there, he was of Lekucha descent. He also said the same thing. Why don't you uh, give one new Bhashya to the Sutra if you think that every word that is being told here is wrong? That is the which has been told in the Shankara Sutra Bhashya is wrong. Come on, you only compose one. So then Acharya Madhva accepted the challenge. And it is now said with the conclusion of this chapter that Madhyageha at one time he came to the Mata and he saw Madhva engaged in these kind of debates with eminent scholars and he was winning all the time. He was very charismatic in his speech and whatever he said touched the hearts of the people. Listening to him and looking at him, Madhyageha was overwhelmed with affection and he was completely feeling blessed that he could actually have been the father of such a stalwart. Now we come to the chapter 10, Sri Madhva's tour through southern India. Very soon after his ordination, Sri Madhva proposed to start on a pilgrimage to the Ganges. But Achyuta Acharya would not consent to one such offset due to the tender years undertaking such a perilous journey. They sat, they say that an unseen voice declared that Ganga herself would visit the local tank within 3 days and would repeat the visit every 12 years. The proposed pilgrimage was abandoned because the Guru refused to be parted from the pupil. Master and pupil made a stay of some duration at Udupi, meeting many a pandit in friendly or serious controversies. But Sri Madhva could not reconcile himself long to stay a stay-at-home life. His mission summoned him to travel through the country and preach his views broadcast. The news of sacred order forbade a permanent dwelling, for this would drift him into the virtual luxuries of a householder. The sannyasin was expected by the Hindu law to live with no thoughts of the morrow on the precarious charity of the public. It was expected that he should be ever on the move and live contented with whatever God chose to put in his way by way of food or shelter. Achyuta Prekshacharya did not want to part with Madhva. Once, when Madhva wanted to leave and go to the Badri Yatra, that time, but it is said that Ganges itself came to the tank there and she would reappear there every 12 times. So, the proposed pilgrimage was abandoned. But however much Acharya wanted him to stay. Acharya Madhva could not reconcile with that because he was a sannyasi. He wanted to keep moving, and that was what is the dictate in the Hindu religion, that a sannyasi should not stay in one place for long. He has to go about, and wherever he went, whatever food he was given, whatever shelter he was given, he has to take that and be there. Sri Madhva, true in the law, begged leave to start on some pilgrimage. The Guru yielded at last and agreed to accompany him on a pilgrimage through the chief holy places of southern India. Our modern ideas of sannyasin and his tour are largely associated with retinues and paraphernalia. When we think of an ascetic, our minds rest on the princely matadipatis who travel in palanquins, maintain horses, elephants, and camels, keep an armed guard, and carry about plenty of silver and gold. We are not used to sannyasins that carry all their luggage on their backs, consisting only a few saligram stones and metallic images. The spectacle of a pedestrian monk whose bed is Mother Earth and whose covering is the blue vault of heaven is to us rather rare. During the 100 years that has passed since the book was written, we can replace the horses, elephants, and camels with the usually they have a very big van or a beautiful car, and also they travel by the flights, aeroplanes. So, sannyasins randomly they do not carry things, they just take the danda and walk. Now, previously they used to carry whatever their puja, worshipable idols and their saligramas along with them, and they used to walk. And wherever they slept, it was on Mother Earth, and their roof was the sky. That is how they were very, very frugal in their living. The India of the 20th century is not the India of the medieval times. This is 700 years before what this book was written. At that time, how was India? We are cast on an age when the ancient ideals and methods have undergone a wholesale revolution. Our idea of locomotion is associated with motor cars and steam engines, and today, of course, aeroplanes. We are surrounded by facilities of communication unknown before, fine roads and metalled highways, Australian ways and spring carriages. Ours is the age when time and distance have been annihilated by the achievements of machinery. Jules Verne proves that it is possible to travel around the globe in 80 days with a simple portmanteau containing a few banknotes. We are getting accustomed to have our wants supplied by turning a handle or pressing a button, as if in a house of enchantment. At the time of our history, southern India comprised numerous small kingdoms, of the sovereigns of which claimed to be independent of one another. The west coast consisted of three parcels, Konkana, Tuluva, and Kerala. The coasts of Coromandel included Telangana, Dravida, Chola, and Pandya regions. The interior, hedged in by the strips of the east coast and the west coast, had divisions such as Andhra, Karnataka, and Konga. So here Acharya describes the southern India as it was in the 1200s. So at that time there were many kingdoms, and each kingdom was ruled by a king. All of them were independent of each other. The west coast they were Konkana, Tuluva, and Kerala. And the coast of the Coromandel included this Telangana, Dravida, Chola, and Pandya regions. So the east coast and the west coast had divisions such as the Andhra, Karnataka, and Konga. So we see that these three coasts are there in the southern part of India. Much is not known of the political, social, and economical condition of the period. There was one noteworthy element of homogeneity in the circumstance that the Mohammedan hordes of the north had not yet descended to the south of the Deccan. The indigenous civilization still remained pure and unaffected by extraneous influence. The iconoclasm of the Musalman had not yet broken the idols of our temples and introduced any Gosha into our manners. So we see that during the time when Madhwa was traveling, there was no invasion of any foreign rulers or Mohammedans also, especially in the south. Just north of Konkana was Maharashtra with its capital at Daulatabad under the rule of the Yadava dynasty. They held sway for several centuries until overthrown by the Bahimini Mohammedans in 1347 AD. The kingdom of Vijayanagar was on the eve of growing into the most powerful empire of India. Vijayanagar exists now a pile of ruins and debris of a forgotten greatness, resorted to only by antiquarians and archaeologists. There lies hidden beneath the debris a city as vast as London, with all its towers, turrets, palaces, and temples, forts and barracks pulled brick by brick and stone by stone, and scattered for miles by the vindictive onslaught of an infuriated soldiery. This is the empire that turned a new chapter of glory and power in 1336 AD under the joint exertions of Bukka I and Vidyaranya. Now they have talked, Acharya talks about the Vijayanagar Empire, which had just begun to flourish at that time. So it was such a beautiful city, but now it is forgotten completely, and it is nothing but a ruin where people just go for looking at that. It's like an archaeological place where people can just think, oh, long back, this was the place where the elephants were tied, this was the place where the jewels were sold on the streets of Vijayanagar. The the flourishing time of the Vijayanagar Empire began in 1336 AD. The ruins of Hampi call up memories of sadness such as no cataclysms of nature can awaken. We revere Pampa Kshetra as part of the great Dandakaranya, immortalized by Valmiki. It was here that Sri Ramachandra met Sugriva and Hanuman. It was here that he performed marvels of archery. So the ruins of Hampi are actually from the Ramayana times. If you go to, it was revered as the Pampa Kshetra, and it was part of the Dandakaranya, which was described by Valmiki at length in the Ramayana. And it is the same place where Rama met Sugriva and Hanuman. During the days of Sri Madhwa, Vijayanagar was fairly prosperous kingdom. Vijayadwaja had built the city in 1150 AD, and his successors were strengthening and consolidating its resources. The zenith of power was far reached after the time of Sri Madhwa. Pampa Kshetra is of sacred memory to us even now for the additional reason that the banks of the Tungabhadra at this spot afforded the last resting place of many a great sannyasin that succeeded Sri Madhva in the line of pontiffs. Sage Padmanabha and Narahari Tirtha had their Vrindavans on these banks. It was necessarily the scene of their holy labors during the period that they honored the priestly throne. So this place, the sanctity of that Pampa, of that Kshetra, which is now called as Hampi, where the Navabrindavana is described by Acharya now. And then he goes on to describe about the other parts. To the south of the Vijayanagar kingdom, the kingdom comprising Mysore and the west coast was under the rule of the descendants of one Vishnuvardhana. This king, whom Sri Ramanuja converted to Vaishnavism in the 12th century, it was he that broke the power of the western Chalukyas. Narasimha III and his son Bellala III covered the whole period of Sri Madhwa's career. This is in the Mysore region. Vishnuvardhana ruled, and he was converted by Sriman Ramanuja to be a Vaishnavite during the time period of 1104 to 1141 AD. He only won victory over the Chalukyas. And during the time of Madhva, the kings in this region were Narasimha III and his son Bellala III. It was a time of profound peace and of enlightened sovereigns. It was the period when the country came to be studded with marvels of architectural skill. It was a time peculiarly marked by religious upheavals. In these conditions favorable to reform, Sri Madhva set out from Udupi with his guru and travelled south by easy marches. It is certain that he passed by Mangalore, crossed the Netravati, and reached the town of Vishnu Mangalam. Beyond this, the route taken is far from clear. As Madhva set out from Udupi, he was traveling to the south, and at that time it was just suitable because there was lot of peace reigning in the country. And when there is peace in the country, only the people of the country will be able to think about things like a spiritual mentality will be more possible. They will be more engaged in their mental states of how to improve themselves mentally, how to become more elevated. If they have to be fighting for their daily food and their daily existence, then they would not have any time for spiritual upliftment. But during the time when Madhva was starting to travel towards the south, all the places were in a state of peace. There was lot of prosperity. So Madhva set out and he took small and easy marches. Means he used to camp after walking for a distance. He used to stop and camp there. And it is certain that he once he reached Mangalore. From there he crossed the Netravati river and then he reached the town of Vishnu Mangala. After that, what did he do is not so clear. Authentic evidence fixes Vishnumangalam as the village going by this name about 27 miles south of Mangalore. For this reason, not easy to guess at this distance of time, Vishnumangalam seems to have been a favorite place of sojourn with Sri Madhva. He often spent weeks if not months in this town camping in the temple of Vishnu. There were evidently many people here who owed allegiance to Achyuta Preksha as their guru. Numerous entertainments were given to this party in this town on a large scale. Sri Madhva was the center of general attraction. His youth and learning was the absorbing topic of talk in public and private conversations. His popularity brought on daily entertainments. He was feted with sumptuous bhikshas, in one of which he chose to exhibit an extraordinary feat of digestion. Vishnumangalam seems to be quite a favorite with Acharya Madhva, and since it was near to Udupi, many people from this town or village were the disciples of Achyuta Preksha already. And whenever they came to this Vishnu Mangalam, they were entertained. Like many people used to host the Bhiksha. And in the Bhiksha, they used to prepare a lot of lot of feast. So on one such Bhiksha, Acharya showed an extraordinary feat of digestion, and that is now described, after which we will end this session. When Sri Madhva had just finished a heavy dinner and done just full justice to it, the host brought a large bunch of 200 plantains and begged of the master to partake of the same. He quietly took them and ate away every fruit of the bunch without the least exertion or difficulty. The other guests of the occasion, and the assembled people were struck with amazement. While no other person could have eaten half a dozen fruits under the circumstances, Sri Madhva had gulped fully 200. They rubbed their eyes with wonder and perplexity and began to question him. They asked him eagerly how he had managed what appeared to them an impossibility. The master replied that he possessed a digestion of unusual vitality. To give them an idea, he said that the animal heat within him was a flame as thick as the thumb, capable of easily consuming any food in any quantity. So Acharya Madhva has himself declared that he had a digestion fire as thick as the thumb, and he could digest very well anything that he ate, and that's why he could eat the 200 bananas. After that, he went to Trivandrum, and we will look at that part of it in the next sitting. Shri Krishnarpa Namastu.